Alright, fellow tacticians, welcome back. This is a Command Ops 2 Let's Play, episode 2, and we're playing the scenario Molenhoek Counter Attack, which is part of the Highway to the Reich scenario pack. Before I carry on, let me just switch off all the user interface elements. You can do so allegedly by pressing Q, but this doesn't always work. Oh, right now it works, but you can also press this button here. Alright, so far our attack is progressing really nicely. Our parachute infantry battalion has taken a position here and is right now still fighting against this little platoon of anti-tank guns, not much of a problem. Kampfgruppe Hermann has made its way up here, and there are obviously some stronger concentrations of US paratroopers here on the Kalkberg and the Ostberg. And in the north everything is going well. So Kampfgruppe Reich, 2 battalions, have punched through very weak US opposition here and is now in the process of securing this important junction here. There are still some enemy units around here though. Now, in the last episode my plan was to first establish a line of defense here with a special anti-tank defense in these 2 points. However, I have taken a closer look and reconsidered this plan. Especially the nursery simply seems too risky for me. And now first let me explain why I think that this bottleneck here might be too risky to defend. So, if we are speaking about anti-tank defense, we have to consider our anti-tank weapon, and as I've made clear in the last part, we only have some very short-range Panzerschreck and Panzerfaust. So if you can turn on the range rings for anti-armor. Here you can see the range of our anti-tank weapons. So there are 3 rings here, 1 darker ring, 1 medium and 1 light red ring. These would correspond to the different levels of effectiveness. So right here we only have a range of 200 meters, but if we, for a comparison, take the anti-personnel ring, you can see that the darker ring is the first one. This would be the ambush range, where our unit can exert 67% of its maximum anti-personnel firepower. The second ring is a kind of effective range, where the unit can exert 33% of its anti-personnel firepower. And the lightest ring, this light green ring here, would be the maximum range ring. So beyond this range here, we have no anti-personnel firepower whatsoever. So 0 to 33, 33 to 67, and 67 to 100% of, in this case, anti-personnel firepower. So the same is true for anti-armor, but here we only have 1 effective range, which is 200 meters. And for bombardment, it works in a similar way. So for bombardment, there's only 1 blue range, which is the maximum bombardment range, and then there is a black range, which is a black circle, which is the minimum bombardment range. So for example, if we take this flak here, you can see that it does have the option to bombard. You can see that the blue range ring is there. However, it has a pretty high minimum bombardment range, which is, I suppose, because it is not designed for bombardment as an artillery unit. Our anti-tank weapons have a very, very short range. Now what this means is that we want the enemy to be very close to us, okay? Because we don't want the enemy to stay out of our range while we are in their range. And the chances for enemies to come closer once they have spotted us is very slim. Okay, so when spotting enemy infantry, tanks will usually stop and keep the enemy infantry in their effective range and not come any closer, except for special circumstances. But generally speaking, they understand that infantry is dangerous if it is too close. Okay. So what this means is that we have to make proper use of visibility and line of sight. We want to be hidden until the enemy is within our short anti-armor range. Now for this we need to understand how visibility and spotting works in CommandOps. And I dare say it's quite a sophisticated system. So first of all, one option is naturally the lay of the land, hills, depressions, mountains, ridges, etc. Now in this case I don't go into detail explaining how they use the map tool, but in this case it's clear that the terrain here is pretty flat. Okay, so if you take a look here, we have a height of 12 meters and the height here is 11 meters. Okay, so the terrain here is very flat. So there are no ridges that we can use to our advantage. So this means that we have to take a closer look at vegetation and built-up areas, etc., in order to stay hidden. Now, and one option here is the wood, and the other option would be the nursery, which is represented as factory terrain. Now, first it is important to understand that terrain and visibility in CommandOps works on a grid. So not the large square kilometer grid that you can see here, but rather final resolution of 100 meter grids. There's no option to toggle this grid or to display this 100 by 100 meter grid, but you can get a pretty good idea if you use a little trick and bring up your tools, and then you can choose any quickest or covered path. Motorized or non-motorized doesn't matter. Any of these two will do. And then if you draw a path, if you look very closely you can see that around the path there are little red dots. So one is here, one is here, one is here, and these are actually the center points of the 100 by 100 meter grid. So in this case, let me quickly draw. So there's a center point here, 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 here. So you understand that the grid is actually designed like this. Alright. So these are, for example, 4 squares of the final resolution grid of 100 by 100 meters. And all terrain sticks exactly to this grid. And this also explains a few inconsistencies. For example, if we click here, we can see that actually it should be open terrain. However, the terrain info tells us that this is major river. Well, this is because the whole grid here, second grid from the left, is still considered to be major river, and the border between the next square would be somewhere around here. So yes, okay, and here we jump over to the next square. You can see that, and the next square is just highway terrain. And now in this case we have 1 square of factory terrain here. The square below that is major river. The square to the left of it is major river, highway, orchard. And then this second square here we also have factory, orchard and highway terrain. And then let me just check this. Okay, so there are 2 squares of factory terrain. Let me put that in here. So the center would be here and here. So 2 grids of factory terrain. Okay. Now what would happen if we place a unit in one of these grids? Let's say we put one of our units here. Okay. So would this unit stay hidden from the enemy or not? to answer this question, it is important to understand how spotting in CommandOps works. Now let's say we have an enemy unit here, up here. So the way it works is that this enemy unit has a certain base line of sight quality value. This base quality might depend on the daylight and weather conditions. So obviously in rain you'd get a lower base quality than in sunny weather. And also it might depend on certain aspects such as suppression. So if a unit is currently suppressed, then it cannot spot that well, etc. Okay, so we have a base quality for line of sight. So the next thing we do is we draw a line to the unit to be spotted. Okay. And now it is important to know that every time our line of sight enters a new square, so for example the border would be here, 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 etc. You get the idea. The quality of the line of sight is reduced according to the terrain type of the square it enters. So in this case, all these terrain here is open ground. So if at all, the line of sight would be only reduced very, very slightly for this distance here. However, at that point right here, as the line of sight enters a new square, and this new square is actually factory terrain, line of sight would be reduced. It is important to understand that the amount of line of sight quality reduction does not only depend on the type of terrain of the new square, but also it depends on the kind of action that the unit you are trying to spot is making. And also it depends on the type of the unit you're trying to spot. Now this may sound very complicated, but to put it simply, infantry is harder to spot than vehicles, tanks, and vehicles are harder to spot than big guns, artillery guns. And also deployed stationary units are harder to spot than moving units, and moving units are harder to spot than units that are firing. Okay, so the amount of line of sight quality reduction depends on the type of terrain, the type of the unit you are trying to spot, and the action of the unit you are trying to spot. Okay, so these are the three principles. And one last but very important factor is that the line of sight quality reduction is increased with distance. So if there was an enemy unit here, then its line of sight would still be reduced here because it enters factory terrain. However, the effect is much smaller than the effect of on the line of sight of this unit here, because this unit is farther away from the terrain than this one. Okay, and this is extremely important because this distance-based system allows for imbalances or advantages of spotting. So for example, if you put a unit into the woods and the other unit is out there, then this unit right here can actually see this unit, but the same is not true the other way around. This unit here cannot see this unit because this unit is much closer to the line of sight blocking terrain, in this case wood, than the unit here. So the line of sight of this unit gets reduced much more by entering the wood than the line of sight of this unit. It's complicated, but it's quite logical. Okay, now back to our question. This unit here can see through open terrain without any problems. So, in other words, the line of sight quality at this point will still be pretty high. And this means that there's a high chance for a line of sight to penetrate into the next square, the factory terrain square, and the quality of the line of sight within for this first square will still be pretty high. In other words, the chance for a unit to see our unit that is positioned in the nursery is very, very high. And if a unit can see another unit, then it can also fire at the unit. And the nursery terrain is not deep enough to provide decent line of sight protection from the north. Things would be very different if there were, for example, 4 squares of factory terrain. In this case, you could position a unit up down here, and this unit here would be pretty safe from detection because there are 2 squares of factory terrain in between a supposed enemy position and the position of our own unit. But as there's only 1 square depth, it's simply too risky. So our units would be discovered by any tanks or long-range weapons that come down the road. And although factory terrain provides some cover from enemy tank fire, it's still a very one-sided affair because basically the enemy can stay here and fire, and I can fire back. So it's just a matter of time until my unit will retreat. Okay. Okay, so the nursery is too risky, but there's still the wood. So the wood actually is, of course, deep enough. So the depth of the squares that have wood terrain is sufficient. So I could set up a unit here at the second 1 square away of the edge. So this unit would be very safe from line of sight, from discovery from here and also here. So this seems to be a rather good ambush position. The enemy cannot see us until he is relatively close. However, not close enough. So what would happen if the enemy advances very, very reasonably along the road? So in this case, the enemy might detect us right from here. So this is only 1 square, so the enemy has a chance to see us. And unfortunately, this position here is still too far away for us. So remember that our Panzerschreck have a range of 200 meters, so one additional square, so it would be somewhere like that, okay, our radius. So this is not a good position to stop a tank advance. So I would need a second position here to have another radius, but as I've explained before, this position here is too risky. So okay, and now you understand why I considered the nursery bottleneck to be too risky to hold. However, there are many other bottlenecks on this map that I can use. So I came up with a new plan, and according to this new plan, I decided to set up my defensive line not here, but rather along this line. Okay. Basically what I want to do is use woods as often as possible, because woods simply provide the perfect ambush situations. So we will have control here. These are all perfect ambush positions because the wood is deep enough. Then we can set an ambush up here and here, so that this open space would be covered by the radii of our anti-tank weapons. Then we have a bottleneck here. We have a bottleneck here, and in fact we could make use of the whole corridor here. This road here also offers proper ambush positions. And then I think this right here might be important, because I think have to check that motorized units can actually pass through here. And then of course we have a road here and a road here. So the positions that I've marked here are much better than this one, because wood is deep enough to have proper line of sight protection. However, as you can easily see, there are quite a lot of positions that I have to cover. So this is the major drawback of this idea. I have to spread out my troops over a very long frontage. Nevertheless, I decided to go with this new plan. So one first thing I'd have to do is to secure the Kaikberg and, if possible, the Ostberg as well, because there's still a major concentration of enemy of US paratroopers here in this area. So my next aim would be to clear these two mountains of US troops. Without further ado, let's continue with the game.
Copy me, over. Do you copy me? Do you copy me? Over. 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 Do you copy me? Over.
Okay, time for a short update. So, Kampfgruppe Hermann was quite successful in clearing the Kalkberg. However, it proved to be very difficult to disengage with our advanced companies here. So, as the enemy was still in this little wood here, our troops on the highway were engaged by these troops and had a pretty difficult time to disengage. I had planned the attack to use this path here, so I would make use of the cover that the wood provides, and for this reason the companies tried to move back to the forming up point. However, in the end only one company made it back. The other two companies started the attack from here, so that's a bit of the AI's own initiative here. I've set up one company of my parachute infantry in a position here, and this is primarily to be used as an observation point. So this unit here should be able to observe any enemy units from here on. So due to the wood, it might not see what is happening here at Molenhoek, but from this level on, it should have a pretty clear line of sight. It seems as if there is some enemy unit here. The quality of the sighting is very poor, but so far the unit has not attacked, so I assume perhaps it has taken up a stationary position here as well. Up here everything is going okay, so there are still some rather desperate attempts of the US parachuters to break my line, or rather they are moving into my line at some points. And now I'm trying to clear the all-important Großbeck objective, which is a major objective, so I'm sending back a few troops to clear these areas here. So another update. Kampfgruppe Hermann is still fighting here, and the enemy doesn't really give us a lot of ground. Kampfgruppe Hermann is now very exhausted, which is just natural, given that Kampfgruppe Hermann first advanced here, then went back to here, attacked uphill through dense woods on the Kikeberg. So it's just natural that Kampfgruppe Hermann is now quite exhausted. What else? Well, this unit here, it turned out this unit here was destroyed. And other than that, there's not much going on in the north. However, the most important information at this point is that we have actually spotted the first British troops. We have to admit that our line of sight reliability is very poor here, so the information might not be correct. However, there seem to be some kinds of vehicles involved here. And right now, it's assumed that this would be an armored company with Sherman tanks and Sherman Firefly tanks, but as reliability is still poor, it might be something else actually. And our observation post has obviously paid off, so we had no chance to see these units here if it wasn't for our observation post. So no other unit here can really draw a line of sight on this area here. And I'm positive that we'll soon discover what this unit actually is. And also we might be seeing lots and lots of British troops following this unit. And at this point in the game, I thought it would be really advantageous for me if the exhausted Kampfgruppe Hermann could stay out of battle for the rest of the day. So one thing I decided at this point to do is to use my artillery battery to cover this area around the nursery with harassment fire. So as my medium artillery battery has a pretty large area of saturation, it is quite useful in this case because you can cover almost the whole area here. And what I did was that I gave a bombardment order for a very long time, so several hours, but with the slowest rate of fire, so that ammunition consumption would not be that extreme. And by this I hoped that I would not only slow down the enemy advance, because units would need to stop and take cover and lose cohesion, but also I thought maybe I could separate any tanks from their infantry, because, well, tanks have no real problem to advance through artillery fire, even though there might be some casualty here and there if the artillery is strong enough. But infantry, especially non-motorized infantry, has a pretty tough time if it wants to go through such a large area of artillery saturation. So I thought maybe I could stop the infantry here in this area and have the tanks advance in an isolated manner, so that it would be safer for my infantry to engage tanks, especially in night time.
Do you copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Over. copy me? Do you copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Do you copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Over. copy me? Do you copy me? Over. 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 Do you copy me? Do you copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Do you copy me? Do you copy me? Over. copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Over. Do you copy me? Over.